To moderate the rest of this morning's plenary, I am honored and privileged to introduce to you Margaret Davidson. Margaret has been a real mentor and friend for me over the last 6, 7, 8 years. She knows everybody, and she is more than willing to take the time to take your call, to sit down and have dinner with you, to help you figure out what you want to do. So Margaret, I mean, you may not realize the influence you've had on this week, but it's such an honor to have you here. Thank you so very much.
Ray has great taste in restaurants, so I'm always willing to have dinner with you, Ray. And of course, I have a really cushy job because he says I'm moderating, but the fact is I'm not really moderating. All I'm doing is going to be introducing you to 3 really great talks. And I get to have a few minutes beforehand, so all I really want to say about this conference, since we're about harnessing the power of the ocean, and over the next few days I think we'll find out not only who's doing what and how they're doing it, but where can we all go together, just like the congressman suggested. But to start us off, before the 3 important speakers, let me just say that I don't think that this conference is really so much about our technology, our platform, our data, our tools, or our products. I think that what this meeting is about is each one of us, individually and organizationally, doing a better job of connecting with one another, making sure that what we do, whatever that is, it is more accessible, it is more relevant, and it clearly demonstrates the public return on the investment. So with that, it is my pleasure, as always, to introduce my boss, Dr. Kathryn D. Sullivan. Kathy came back to NOAA in May of 2001 to serve as the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Environmental Observation and Prediction, and as Deputy Administrator for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. She also, in her spare time, performs the duties of the Chief Scientist. And it says here that she's a distinguished scientist, a renowned astronaut, and an intrepid explorer. Now, I'm assuming most of you can read, so I'm not going to read this to you. What I'm going to do is tell you about an experience I had with Kathy, which is now, well, let's just say it was a while ago. For any of you who've ever lived with pre-adolescents, you will know that one of the more challenging times in life is when they're in the middle school phase, because they've stopped being sweet and they haven't yet gotten their driver's license, and they're just, in general, not the most pleasant people you've ever lived around. I had the opportunity some time back to be with Kathy and a bunch of middle school science kids. And what I want to tell you was that it wasn't Kathy Sullivan, the first woman to walk in space, or Kathy Sullivan, the chief scientist of NOAA, who was in that room. It was Kathy Sullivan, the science educator illuminator, who was in that room, and those kids loved her. And to me, there is no greater testimony than being able to enthrall a classroom full of 13-year-olds. PhDs is easy. 13-year-olds, 12, 13-year-olds is really tough. And she was actively engaged, and they thought she was wonderful, and so do I. Kathy.
Would that I could have that effect with any number of adults in Washington, D.C. But that's a separate matter. There is a slide changer here somewhere. Well, thank you, Margaret, very much, and Ray, thank you deeply for the opportunity to be here today. What a great committee you've assembled. The presence of the dignitaries who joined us this morning is, fine evidence of the kind of traction and commitment that you built through this community to bring this conference here. I want to really salute the conference organizers for choosing to honor Admiral James D. Watkins in the program this week. As has been said, it is alleged that this changes slides. There we go. As has been said, Jim Watkins led a remarkable life, and in many respects, predominantly an oceanic one. Rising from midshipman to chief of naval operations, Admiral Watkins led a Navy that developed a maritime strategy for dealing with the USSR, deployed naval forces in response to crises worldwide, and improved the quality of life and service for its sailors. This considerable achievement, however, was but the first chapter in a much, much greater ocean story. In the 1990s, Admiral Watkins served as the president of the Joint Oceanographic Institutions and later founded the Consortium for Oceanographic Research and Education, or CORE, an organization designed to focus on the need for integrated and coordinated ocean education, ocean science, and ocean policy. In 2007, CORE and JOI merged to form the Consortium for Ocean Leadership, an organization that continues today to pursue the Admiral's vision. But wait, there's more, as they say on late night TV. He also chaired the United States Commission on Ocean Policy for President George W. Bush. Established by the Oceans Act of 2000 on January 20th of 2001, this body was charged with developing a comprehensive national ocean policy that would cover governance, research, education, marine operations, stewardship, and investment. It conducted research and held hearings nationwide before producing its final report in the fall of 2004. Titled An Ocean Blueprint for the 21st Century, this work defied the norm of such grand blue ribbon panels, producing reports that languish on dusty shelves. It proved highly influential, thanks in no small part to Admiral Watkins' foresight in planning for sustained follow-up. He achieved that by partnering with the leadership of the Pew Oceans Commission, on which I had the privilege of serving, to form the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative, a bipartisan initiative designed to carry forward the work of both bodies and maintain momentum towards the development of a formal national ocean policy. And that goal, of course, came to fruition in 2010 in the form of President Obama's Executive Order 13547, the stewardship of the ocean, our coasts, and the Great Lakes. President Bush recognized the Admiral's lifetime of national service in 2008 with the Presidential Citizens Medal. Today, this room is full of people who were taught, led, and/or inspired by Jim Watkins. People whose work in ocean science, policy, and education constitutes yet another part of his great legacy. So as I reflected on the dedication of the conference to the Admiral and its themes, I decided to frame my remarks around his vision of a national ocean enterprise, and more specifically, the 7 societal benefits that he identified as the central logic for that endeavor. And these are, just briefly, improving predictions of climate change and weather and their effects on coastal communities and the nation, improving the safety and efficiency of marine operations, mitigating the effects of natural hazards, improving national and homeland security, reducing public health risks, protecting and restoring healthy coastal marine ecosystems, and enabling the sustained use of marine resources. I have to say the congruence of these 7 elements with NOAA's mission purposes is always striking to me. One might well think that the Admiral was channeling Julius Stratton and designing NOAA in a second round when he formulated his vision for this ocean enterprise. But it is a critical enterprise, a bold and important vision, and one that is very apropos to our week here in Virginia Beach. The importance of the ocean to the United States is readily apparent in countless statistics. I always like this graphic as a simple touchstone to remind us of the basic facts. This is a plot of our population density in the center of the country and along the coastlines. You see the height of the bars proportional to the population in different cities, and but a glance will make clear to you the degree to which we are indeed a maritime nation and in fact an ocean people. My home is in Columbus, Ohio. I show this graph frequently at the Midwest to remind even my Midwestern neighbors and friends, you too, sitting hundreds of miles away from the ocean and thinking you're not maybe an ocean or ocean citizen, are in fact exactly that. Your climate, your weather are determined by the pulse of the ocean. Your goods come and go through the ports of our country, more than 95% of the goods in trade in the United States. enter and leave our shores on ship bottoms transiting our ports. More than 50% of us live within coastal counties. Ocean resources and ecosystem services underpin the economies and the quality of life for all of these Americans, and in fact, these coastal counties are our most vibrant communities and economies. To sustain these benefits, to fulfill any notion we dare have about harnessing the power of the ocean, it is imperative that we understand the ocean richly as the complex and dynamic Earth system that it is, and that we apply that understanding to our decisions and our actions. The application part of that sentence points to the importance of observation, modeling, and prediction, the science-based tools that let us anticipate possible future events or conditions and test the possible consequences of various actions. And although prediction is explicit in only one of the 7 societal benefits identified by the Admiral, I would argue that that caliber of understanding, that robustness of observations, that predictive capability is in fact essential to all of them. I refer to this, could you back the slide up one for me, please? I refer to this kind of rich understanding and the predictive capability that it supports as critical environmental intelligence. And this capacity rests on 4 equally important and interconnected pillars. They are environmental observations, scientific research, by which I mean a really rich and nuanced understanding of Earth system processes and the dynamic connections between Earth system processes. Modeling, the ability to represent, to instantiate that understanding in computational tools and the computational infrastructure that supports this. And of course, talent, the people, the creativity, the expertise, who are the enterprise, who advance each of those components separately and who provide the integration that makes them so useful to living wisely and well on this planet. Our efforts to garner any of the 7 benefits that underpin the Admiral's vision, I would assert, rest on these 4 pillars. And these in turn are, of course, the very DNA of NOAA, the fundamental tools of our trade. Now, many of you are quite familiar with NOAA or one or another facet of it. I want to use the 3 mission domains of NOAA, science, service, and stewardship, as lenses through which to take just a glimpse at what we're doing within NOAA with many, many partners, many in this room and in academia and in industry, to deliver products and services that move towards the vision that the Admiral enunciated. NOAA's mission domain extends literally from the surface of the sun to the bottom of the ocean. Our mission is to understand the Earth, the atmosphere, and the oceans, and more importantly, to transform that essential understanding into reliable, timely, relevant, actionable information that can inform decisions. The myriad decisions that we confront each and every day as we live our lives and craft our livelihoods on this very dynamic planet. Decisions that determine our comfort. Did you happen to grab a jacket this morning? A little cooler than yesterday? Or our safety. Do you have a tornado evacuation plan? Do you know your hurricane evacuation plan? Decisions that affect the immediate profitability as well as the long-term sustainability of our communities and our businesses. And we fulfill this mission through a portfolio of science, service, and stewardship activities that we'll now take a little bit of a deeper look at. NOAA is first and foremost a science agency. Our science mission underpins everything that we do. We do research within NOAA laboratories and facilities. We support academic research in many institutions across the country, and we harvest the results of research investments by others all across the globe. I think NOAA's research enterprise exemplifies Pasteur's quadrant. It is use-inspired research, some of which is quite fundamental in nature, but all of which is very purpose-driven. For example, understanding why only some thunderstorms become tornadic, or breaking through the decades-long barrier that has limited our hurricane intensity forecasting, will take fundamental research into phenomenology such as vortex generation processes and the internal structure of tropical cyclones. Progress here would contribute directly or indirectly to virtually every one of the 7 societal benefits enumerated by Admiral Watkins. Turning to the ocean, NOAA science drives continual improvements in nautical charting and, again, through very basic research work, the development of new sonar applications. So you see on the screen right now a very almost commonplace nowadays multi-beam sonar image. That's a small aircraft that crashed this past April near Port Canaveral, Florida, fortunately with no loss of life. With very standard side scan and multi-beam techniques, NOAA's survey teams were able to pinpoint the location of the wreck just inside the inbound lane of the shipping channel in 36 feet of water, where it posed a clear danger to the surface vessels and submarines that transit that port. Old hat, you would say, in this room, I'm sure. Well-established science, packaged applications, nothing terribly researchy about that. But there is much more information in each ping that comes back to the sonar than is used to assemble this basic multi-beam image of the bottom. And that information is contained, of course, in the acoustic backscatter, that for the finding of an airplane is noise, but for other purposes is valuable signal. This animation shows a sonar track recorded by scientists at NOAA's Alaska Fisheries Science Center in the eastern Bering Sea in 2010, locations about 850 kilometers northwest of Dutch Harbor. The data were taken by our fisheries service vessel, the Oscar Dyson, one of our newer ships, equipped with the Simrad ME-70 sonar. This is one of the few multi-beam echo sounders that is designed specifically to enable fisheries science. This is actually taken on July 23rd of that year in the midst of a 9-week combined acoustic and trawl survey looking at the walleye and pollock population. What this type of data offers is the ability to examine with very high fidelity the morphology of fish schools, and the blue blurbs that you see left in the wake of the advancing wedge are midwater returns from fish schools. Our fisheries scientists are using this type of data to generate both population statistics, that is the frequency of occurrence of schools of different sizes, and time series data, monitoring the evolution of a single school over time, that can be compared with predictions that are based on previously published work or new fish behavior models. The premise behind this work is that we can, in principle, model how fish aggregate and disaggregate if we understand at some basic level their sensory and cognitive abilities. In essence, our goal is to tune the behavior models using multi-beam data as ground truth, and thereby to further our understanding of how these fish sense their environment, how they process sensory information, and respond to the ecosystem in which they live. NOAA's Stewardship Mission is rooted in a variety of formal mandates that charge us to protect, restore, and sustain marine resources and the ecosystem services on which we so essentially depend. To name just a few, these include the Magnuson-Stevenson Fishery Conservation and Management Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Endangered Species Act, the CERCLA, and other laws. As vast as it is, we all know that our ocean is not infinite in its bounty. The vital importance of ocean stewardship should surely be clear to all of us, especially those of us in this room and in this day and age. Mass media outlets and scientific journals alike bring us weekly, if not daily, reports that remind us of this simple truth and illustrate the increasing stresses that are affecting our ocean: overfishing, ocean acidification, dead zones caused by land-based pollution running into the sea, shoreline erosion, sea level rise, coastal habitat loss. It's quite clear that the number of stressors is increasing, and equally clear that we do not have a good handle on the impacts that these multiple stressors have upon the marine environment. There are some hopeful steps of progress, some glimmers on the horizon. NOAA's 2011 Status of the Stocks report shows good progress at ending overfishing and rebuilding the populations of the 528 federal marine species that are covered by our federal fishing mandates. In fact, 2011 was a record-breaking year with a total of 6 fish stocks deemed to be rebuilt. That's the greatest number that have been taken off the overfished list in a single year. These results underscore the strength of science-based management processes. They demonstrate that we are actively turning the corner and ending overfishing and rebuilding the United States fisheries that are so critical to our nation and our economy. U.S. commercial fishermen landed 10.1 billion pounds, billion with a B, of fish and shellfish in 2011, valued at $5.3 billion. This was an increase over the prior year of 1.9 billion pounds and more than $784 million. Last year, we awarded over $4 million to 9 collaborative research projects in 9 different states, aimed at making coastal communities and their environments more resilient to climate change over the next 2 years. These projects will focus on adaptation to sea level rise, as the mayor said, a pressing issue in this region, implementation of low-impact land use development practices, oyster and wetland restoration projects such as are occurring here in the Lynn Haven Basin, and river and watershed management. In other areas, though, our challenges are clearly just beginning and perhaps increasing. Rising ocean acidification combined with other stressors was shown by a recent study to be having tremendous and unexpectedly rapid impact on the world's largest coral reef system, the Great Barrier Reef. Coral on that reef is declining faster than ever, currently down to about 50% of its previous coverage, and at the present rate of decline could fall to just 5% of the area covered within the next decade. On our own West Coast, oystermen have seen firsthand the threat that ocean acidification poses to their businesses and the economic vitality of their communities. West Coast oyster production accounts for more than $84 million in the shellfish industry and supports more than 3,000 jobs. In 2008 alone, one of Oregon's major suppliers found that their harvest plummeted 80% as acidified seawater hit the shores and affected their flats. In the Puget Sound, NOAA is working with our Integrated Ocean Observing System partners to provide ocean pH monitoring and alerts to the shellfish farmers so that they can adapt their operations accordingly, pulling flats when appropriate, delaying the planting of spats. This is a great example of critical environmental intelligence making its way really into the domain of active business intelligence. What about the Chesapeake? Last year, Oregon State University's George Waldbusser found that the pH in the lower part of the Chesapeake Bay is declining at a rate that's 3 times faster than that observed in the open Pacific Ocean, partly due to increased nutrient runoff. Is a Puget Sound prospect looming in this watershed as well? And what will that mean to the oyster bed restoration projects that we just heard about this morning, the ones that are going on out here in Lynn Haven, the ones that are aiming to perhaps regain 10% of what used to be that lavish 19th century oyster harvest in the Chesapeake region? NOAA is perhaps best known through our service mission, in particular the products and information services provided by the National Weather Service. This is the one area where our environmental intelligence arguably touches every single American every single day. But again, there is much, much more. This slide illustrates the main components of our physical oceanographic real-time system, our PORTS system, an environmental information infrastructure that enables safe and efficient maritime commerce. You see the cartoon in the upper left that shows the different installations from satellite relays to sensors on bridges, water level sensors, tide gauges, ADCPs to measure current velocities. On the bottom right, you see an image taken from a bridge. The NOAA logo is sitting on what we call an air gap sensor. This is basically a downward-looking radar altimeter that gives direct information to a ship's bridge to confirm down to the finest scale, down to inches, the air gap remaining between the water line of the ship and the bottom of the bridge. And as a real-world example on the left, you see quite an extraordinary picture of a barge taking 2 really huge container port cranes underneath the Chesapeake Bay Bridge with a clearance truly measured in a little bit of an inch or so. But to be able to know with confidence what your total air gap to the bridge is, factoring in your load, your draft, actual water levels, real-time water levels, real-time tide at that location, windage and everything else makes a tremendous difference. Now, here in this port, the ability to load those colliers that lay offshore, 1,500 pounds, 6 inches deeper draft, because you know you've got the clearance out of the port, millions of dollars per day for each of those colliers and for the coal port itself. Our digital coast tools, our sea level rise impacts viewer, countless tools that NOAA produces these days to create visualizations of the potential physical, ecological, and socioeconomic levels of impacts of sea level rise. We produce, in addition to ports infrastructure, harmful algal bloom forecasts, seafood safety assessments, our environmental response management application developed in response to the Deepwater Horizon event, and also known as IRMA, integrated ocean and coastal mapping and decision support tools such as Coast Watch. The list could go on and on. And again, every one of these products and services rests on that foundation of scientific understanding, observation, modeling, and expertise that I spoke of at the outset. The value of NOAA's diverse capabilities and services, far-flung though they are and so different as they are, is vividly apparent when you encounter catastrophic events like those we did in 2010 and 2011. The Deepwater Horizon Macondo oil spill in the Gulf in 2010, the Japanese earthquake and tsunami at Fukushima in 2011. Now, I want to say at the outset, I know full well that many organizations and individuals in this room played terribly important parts in the response to both of these cases. There were no single-handed heroes in either case. It took all hands on deck. It took every bit of expertise and capacity that we had in the academic, the public, and the private sector pulling together to make sense of those events, to develop the information that responders needed to do what they could to mitigate the consequences and protect populations. But NOAA's rich blend of science, service, and stewardship, our range of tools and expertise, our experience in working across disciplines and delivering science and information for decision support, these equip us to play a very important integrative role in events such as these. Within the federal family, NOAA is uniquely able to span from oceanic and atmospheric circulation modeling for plume dispersion or trajectory projection to seafood safety assessment and everything in between. We're able to rise to these severe challenges precisely because these are the things we do every single day. Just a few other examples on a smaller and less urgent scale. NOAA's Chesapeake Bay office is developing a model that will incorporate data on land use inputs as well as oceanographic and hydrodynamic variables to evaluate the impacts of changing environmental conditions on fisheries resources in the bay. This model will allow local fisheries resource managers to evaluate the effects of their own management strategies on different scales. There are plenty of challenges ahead with all of this accomplishment, and as proud as we may be of the work that we do, wind energy offshore will be another test of all of our knowledge and capability, another challenge to work across boundaries, to really integrate our understanding of all aspects of the ocean and all aspects of the uses that we wish to make of any given area of the ocean. And beyond that, of course, there's an endless array of quite fundamental challenges we've yet to overcome. What are the great frontiers? This cartoon to me just suggests where we really are on some of the things we need to integrate to a fuller understanding of the ocean. We're talking about exceedingly complex environments. That rich understanding we must strive for requires that we go well beyond what we currently can do. The Gulf of Mexico region is both an ecological treasure and a dynamic economic engine. Representing 1/3 of our continental coastline, the Gulf is home to 35% of the United States population and contributes over $2 trillion annually to our economy. Variations in the health of the Gulf of Mexico ecosystem can have profound positive or negative socioeconomic and ecological consequences, both for the region and the nation at large. Increasing stresses on the environment, whether from natural phenomena such as hurricanes or human-induced phenomena ranging from harmful algal blooms to habitat loss, requires, again, sophisticated and precise observation, advanced modeling that allow us to detect early signals of ecosystem change and forecast the consequences of both those changes and our responses. From my view, this level of richly integrated ocean modeling is the next step, the next great frontier that we have to overcome. We're best nowadays at modeling the physical ocean and physical atmospheric variables, air-sea interaction, basic tides, currents, waves, weather, climate, not bad. Basin scale and even regional scale physical circulation patterns, pretty good. We're making progress on coupled air-sea interactions, on coupling across the land-water boundaries, on beginning to characterize bottom types and bring some dimension of the oceanic ecosystem into our modeling. But we have a very, very long way to go when it comes to properly understanding and capturing, representing the living ocean in our models, from the micro to the macroscopic, the benthic to the pelagic, and everything in between. We know all too little about these populations, about the ways in which they depend upon and interact with the ocean ecosystem writ large. And that is surely our next big frontier. It's a daunting challenge. But I'm reminded, coming rather more from the atmospheric side myself, I'm reminded of where we were on weather and climate modeling in the 1970s, when it was pretty significant to have a decent representation of the sun, the basic physics and equations of motion of the atmosphere, pretty okay. Rain, precipitation represented and accounted for pretty well. Mind you, not the clouds from which the rain falls, but we had the rain in there. It took about a decade to move forward to where we're beginning to represent the land surface, beginning to account in a fixed and very parameterized way for ice, which is obviously significant in the polar regions, actually starting to represent clouds. If you track through the evolution of the most advanced models through a lens like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, you can see over the ensuing decades, the 30 years since the 1980s, beginning to account for atmospheric chemistry, beginning to account more richly for actual fluxes between these different domains. We do know how to make this progress. We do know, we have a handle on the mixture of modeling, computation, and observation that we will need to overcome the barriers in ecological forecasting and to make a similar scale of progress in that domain over the next 30 years that we did in the weather and climate domain over the preceding 30 years. This is the capability we have to focus on in the decades ahead. If you look again at those 7 pillars of the Admiral's vision, this is the tool that is pivotal to really garnering and understanding how to sustain the societal benefits we aim to garner from the ocean in at least half of his mission areas. So I was struck by the title of the conference, and I want to reflect on that in closing. We certainly do harness the power of the ocean in a number of ways. It feeds us, supports our maritime commerce, and indeed may become an important new source of renewable energy in the years ahead. But I would urge that we beware of the implication of control that the word harness contains. That, in my view, is clearly faulty. If anything, in fact, it is we who are harnessed to the ocean. The ocean sets the dynamics of our entire planet through the production of oxygen, the sequestration of CO2, the shaping of the continental boundaries on which we live, the buffering of the temperature and the chemistry of our atmosphere. As any astronaut will tell you, this is not an astronaut image, by the way. This is a mosaic of passes from the VIIRS sensor, the imaging spectrometer on our newest National Polar Partnership satellite, the SUMI NPP satellite, currently in operational service with NOAA. But any astronaut who's seen that blue beach ball from a little closer up, just a little closer up, any of us will tell you our planet was misnamed. It should never have been called Terra. It is absolutely aqua, and most of that aqua is the ocean. That just underscores how critically important it is that we continue to advance our understanding and sustain our monitoring of the ocean environment. Only if we do that can we sustain the resources, the economies, the livelihoods that depend on it. it's great to have a conference like this in a place like Virginia Beach, where the importance of this challenge is so very evident. Just outside Nauticus over in Newport, the Elizabeth River is an absolute lifeline of commerce, a vital recreational waterway, and gateway to the intercoastal. The 3 major commercial ports that operate there in the Hampton Roads area handle 16.3 million tons of cargo, valued at $36.1 billion in any given year. The economic impact of the Virginia Port Authority operations was $4.5 billion in revenue and 35,665 jobs, with compensation of $1.6 billion in 2006 alone. Operating this port infrastructure safely and efficiently requires understanding of and real-time data from the ocean. Sustaining its vitality in the decades ahead, in the face of the significant environmental change that we face, requires scientific understanding, observations, and modeling that are sufficiently robust that we can predict future conditions and assess the consequences of our decisions, be they port infrastructure design decisions, wind energy siting decisions, or the environmental management decisions that may lead to the restoration of the bay's oyster beds. The key is knowledge that leads to actionable information that can inform these daily decisions. Our work must be science-based and impact-oriented, user-focused and timely. Our approach must be transdisciplinary, integrative, and collaborative. All of our varied efforts must indeed become an ocean enterprise, as the Admiral so sagely foresaw and as Margaret instructed us in her introduction to this plenary. We will continue to work at these goals every day at NOAA, whether with tailwinds or with headwinds, as we are committed to moving knowledge and applications forward. We will not waver in our commitment to science, our dedication to provide service, and our duty to be wise stewards of the oceans. Many of you know firsthand how tirelessly Admiral Watkins pursued his vision for an ocean enterprise that would benefit society at large and help our nation better understand and benefit from the seas. Whether you worked for him or took a course from him, looked to him as a mentor, or parsed one of the major policies he helped author, I'm sure his passion and vision inspired you. And now the ball is in our court. It's time for us to take up the mantle and continue his quest to build the ocean enterprise that will enable us all to live wisely and well on our ever-changing blue planet. Thank you very much.